So we're back down in the basement. Again, a house of this age has gone through many, many different changes, and you see the remnants of the past utilities. One thing that's kind of fun is this old water pump here that we have in the corner. Brian, tell me what you think this is and how this worked, because I'm not quite sure.
Our best estimate is when I look at the supply source, it has this long pipe that runs all the way to the north side of the house, and there's a cistern directly outside the house that it would collect water from the gutters and the downspouts. One of several cisterns on the property. But the piping is still in place, and it would appear that this pump would have activated an upward movement from this pipe through the ceiling up to the holding tank in the attic. There's probably a several hundred gallon tank, steel tank in the attic that held water, and that would serve as the downward pressure to flush toilets. The house was built with 2 bathrooms, including toilets, so to connect to the sewer system, that would have needed that pressurized water to come down. And so it's interesting whose job it might have been to come down and pump the water, up every day. I imagine somebody drew the short straw for that every day. But there's also discharge valves here to supply water, perhaps for laundry and other means in the basement. A coal-fired furnace would have had a water reservoir for the steam and hot water circulation. So water supply was pretty critical to have here.
Yeah. I can't even imagine the weight of having all that water sitting in a tank up in the house.
Me neither. And thank goodness the attic, the bones of this house are very strong. It was a well-engineered home, and that obviously was included in the plans of the house is your water supply.
Right, right.
And again, with the cisterns, and then eventually city water did run the pipes out this way, and a lot of these systems were probably kept in play for a while, but no, of course, most plumbing codes didn't want a mixture of cistern water and public water to risk contamination. So they might have been used privately, but not connected to the central system.
Yeah. One of the stories that you hear over and over about this house is really quite fun and charming and somewhat scary. So behind us, there's this simple kind of wooden box thing that maybe looks like a closet, or maybe it looks like something is hidden behind it. But it's actually part of a dumbwaiter that would serve the house. It was essentially a residential elevator to get things from floor to floor. Brian, there's a wonderful story about this. Can you share that with us, please?
Well, as Matt said, this goes all the way to the attic, and it's quite large. It's probably about 3 foot square. And as Drew Phillips used to love to tell this story on home tours, his great-grandmother, McDowell, as she got up in years, the maid would often take her from the first floor to the second floor and down via the dumbwaiter. They had a small chair that she sat on, and they would just hoist her up with the rope. It's all counterbalanced, so it probably wasn't terribly difficult. But one day when they were lowering her to the first floor, the rope snapped, and Mrs. McDowell came all the way to the basement. The chair is still in the bottom of the dumbwaiter in broken pieces. Drew felt that was very important to keep as part of the folklore of the home, and I think it's a fascinating story. Mrs. McDowell was not injured. She got up and said, "It's about time I got to see what was going on in this basement." And so she was up in years, but she didn't have any serious injuries from that incident, but it sure makes for an interesting story. And we will certainly leave that broken chair in the bottom of the dumbwaiter to share with our visitors.
That's fantastic. I love that story.
It's pretty cool. And when you see the size of trunks the family traveled with, it wouldn't have been unusual to hoist those trunks to the attic via the dumbwaiter.
Yeah.
It's probably a lot easier than carrying them up the steps.
And you had mentioned the canning room. Let's go take a look back there. If you ever watched the miniseries Downton Abbey, you might get a sense of how a home like this might function on a lower level and just what it takes to keep a house going. One of the fun things that they found is this old washing machine. It is a laundryette. Brian says it dates to about the 1920s, and it's an electric washing machine. So it's rather large. There's some kind of weird looking metal things in here that look a little bit like Dr. Frankenstein trying to bring the laundry to life. But if you could imagine having this and washing the bedding for the house, the clothes, the towels, everything that people use on a daily basis. It wasn't throw it in the Maytag in the basement and walk away. This was hands-on, keeping the house going. And again, just think of the work that would go into a house and living at the late 1900s, early 20th century, about what goes into this. It's pretty fascinating. Let's go back and check out the laundry room, another part of the basement of this house, and kind of see how that was used as well. One of the fun things about this house is that the Historical Society has the original blueprints, so they can actually go through and determine what was planned. That wasn't always what was built, but at least what was planned on the blueprints. And one of the things that shows up in the basement is this amazing soapstone wash tub that we have down here. Now what's kind of cool, if you look at the details, a lot of houses have these out of concrete, but this is soapstone. It's a little bit finer material. But I think it's cool to notice how it's put together with these metal brackets. And even though this is a utilitarian piece that was used for laundry, you know, in addition to the washing machine, perhaps washing animals, but just the fine detail in this leg, you know, they could have just put a piece of stone down here to hold it up. But even simple things like this were designed to a certain aesthetic to really kind of reflect the era of the house. And you'll see that throughout older homes in the hardware on the doors, around the door handles. And it's a fun detail, but it's pretty cool that this is still here and perhaps might still work. We don't know. So we're back on site today at the McDowell-Phillips house, and progress is taking place. You can see CertaPro is down here doing the priming and the cleanup. We have a young gentleman over here getting ready to paint. But what's really exciting is this big heavy metal frame that Brian and I played with last time is in place. So Brian, tell us, what is this doing?
Well, the lintel or the stone above the window arch has had a crack from many, many years. It's a sandstone, so structurally there's just not enough there to hold it in place, although
Right.
it is kind of wedged into the stonework as it is. But we were concerned about that in the long term. So Standard Welding, our neighbor up the street, crafted this nice metal frame,
Yeah.
steel frame, and we put it under the stone. Now the mason's going to work at it a little bit more to tighten things up, put a shim underneath to prevent any water from weeping into it, and then the frame will be painted the same as the window frame. So I think it's going to last a lot longer that way,
Yeah.
and it won't require us to remove that stone, which would have been a huge job.
So the goal is to lift this up a little bit and close that
Correct.
crack
He'll
in the
seal that
stone.
crack
Nice.
once it's lifted up in place a little bit more.
All right, fantastic.
So you have to do these things very slowly.
Very slowly.
You don't crank up fast.
It's like getting out of bed in the morning. Very
because there's a lot
slowly.
of framework attached to everything up above us. So
Yeah.
you move anything slightly, you're going to have some issues. So.
Well, speaking about the framework and doing things slowly, let's go back and check out the barn and the work that's being done in the old barn.
Sure, there's lots going on in the barn today.
In addition to the work that's been done to restore the house, they've also been addressing the two barns on the property. Now this one that's right behind Brian and myself has had a lot of work. It has been added on to. We think it was rebuilt out of some original barns and structures that were here. But it's kind of cool. You can see they're now refacing the front here. Brian, tell me a little bit about what is right above this. You had to do quite a bit of engineering to keep this thing up.
Correct. We believe this portion of the barn was the original section that still had hand-hewn beams, still tree bark on the beams going up, and a totally different construction from the lean-to addition.
Right.
So my theory is in the 1920s, McDowell's had automobiles. They converted this barn into a garage. And that would explain why the one door was a little bit larger than the other to accommodate a car in the 20s was quite tall.
Right,
and
right.
a little narrower than today's cars, but still they were large machines to get in and out.
Yeah.
And they had swing out doors. And,
Like carriage doors?
Yes, carriage
Okay,
doors.
cool.
That would have been on the original barn, I'm sure, just
Yeah.
like that set over there.
Right.
And so our plan is they restructured the framework to beef up. Again, we ran into a little bit of carpenter ant problem that eroded much of the main beam across the front. So behind this sheathing is an engineered beam, which
yeah, you
is
can kinda
far
see that up
stronger today than what was in place before. And that will carry the load of the entire barn. And they rebuilt the structures here on the block foundation to not only give it strength, but also help keep varmints out of the barn, which is our number one concern. And of course, using drip edge, some things, simple materials that can prevent a lot of water damage in the future. So our team's been very good about making sure water doesn't get in and cause any further damage. So in the next few weeks, we should see the barn re-sided.
Fantastic.
New swing outdoors. We have a beautiful carriage design. I think it's going to look awesome. And then there'll be a grand coming home party for the sleigh and carriage. So stay tuned on that one.
We look forward
But
to
in the
seeing
meantime,
that.
we got to dry the roof out too. The roof has several layers of shingles. Originally had wood shingles, and then the asbestos slate shingles were put on probably in the 20s when they added onto the barn.
Yeah.
It would make sense that would probably been the time to do so. It was a very popular material back then. So what the crew found this morning is there was water penetration over the years. Lots of squirrels evidently had a home here.
Sure.
So we're getting rid of all of them. They've been evicted. The underlayment boards have been replaced, and the asbestos slate shingles will be restored. They will give you many, many more years of life, so we really didn't want to have to replace it and save a little money there as well. So in another week or so, this barn's going to be beautiful. It's going to be dry, and I can't wait to have a volunteer paint party here to help not only treat the inside wood, which is all tongue and groove siding, both on the ceiling as well as the walls. It's kind of unique for a garage. And we'll have the exterior painted too.
Fantastic. We look forward to being part of that.
Yeah.
Saving and preserving the McDowell-Phillips house is the goal of the Historical Society, and there's been a lot of work done on this back porch, including removing the original decking and sanding that down. So in the reconstruction, they were able to reuse or preserve the original flooring here on the back deck. The railings are being worked on, but they've used a new product that's kind of cool. It's called SaniTread. It's a 3-step process with a catalyst that acts as a preservative. So Brian was telling me that this is put on, and then it goes down into the wood and the cracks so that it essentially makes it waterproof. So Brian, when this is all done, how will this look? Like right now, it's a little bit rubbery.
Sure. Well, this will all be painted,
things.
of course, and trimmed out. There'll be a final top coat of paint on the porch flooring. And of course, with the pitch of the porch, the water will drain off as it's intended to do. So there is a fairly significant pitch that was original, so we didn't have to alter that, except at the very end where they had to restore some of the boards. But 99% of the wood boards were salvaged.
That's cool.
We removed many layers of paint in the process to get it down this clean to apply this product. But it should last many years and reduce our maintenance costs quite a bit by not having to paint porches every couple of years.
So normally this is used as basement waterproofing, and the literature said they also use it for radon, to block radon. But there's a component that allows it to be used on wood. So it's a really cool product using new technology to help preserve this part of the house so that it's here for another 150 years at least.
We hope.
Fantastic.
Yeah, it's very solid. They've done an excellent job rebuilding all this rear porch. It looks simple, but it was extremely complicated math and geometry to get every angle correct and to get the stair risers and treads to actually be up to current code, and also provide additional railings for security of walking up these steps. So when our guests visit the museum, regardless of how they enter or exit the building, back here they're going to have a safe means of doing so.
Fantastic. Can't wait to see it done.
Oh, me neither.
Today is a very exciting day here at the project house. Brian feels like it's Christmas morning. The house is finally getting painted. For months, the exterior has undergone renovation and restoration. A lot of shingles have been removed and restored and elements added back on. Sherwin-Williams, Cleveland-based company for over 100 years, has been very generous in giving a discount to the project. Sherwin-Williams project paints being used on the house. You can see behind us some of that red is going on, and it's gorgeous. Brian, what do you think?
Oh, I'm very pleased. We've waited a long time for this moment, as you said, and everyone's been asking what colors are we going to paint the house, and I said, well, Drew Phillips had actually researched the colors quite well. There's some minor variations, but for the most part, we're sticking with the way this house was originally painted in 1890. And I think it's going to be great. It's going to be
a little more vibrant, but still historically appropriate with the red and the greens and then some highlights.
Correct.
This is a cool day. I'm so happy I can just see the smile on your face.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. A lot of effort and time and energy, both by our talented carpentry team as well as our volunteers, have really made this all possible, and to the public for their financial donations, which have made it all possible. And we're just really pleased. This is going to be one grand museum when we get this old woman back in shape.
It'll be
Why does everybody call her a woman? I don't know, but it's one of those, I guess they refer to her as the old gal, the old woman. As Joanne King put it, this house breathed a sigh of relief. I believe it. I think Drew did an excellent job caring for the house for many, many years. And had it not been for his attention and upkeep, we wouldn't have this house today.
Absolutely. Fantastic.
So it's all good.
So today we're back at the historic McDowell-Phillips house, giving you a little bit of a preview of the new paint scheme that's going on the front facade. Now last time we were here, they were doing a little bit of final priming and scraping, and that big lift started to go up. You can see the colors are pretty close to what would have been here originally. The red is very rich and it brings out the detail, and then when the windows are painted out with that very, very, very dark green, that'll really pop. And that's something that Victorian-era homes used to do, is paint the window sashes a darker color rather than a lighter color, tend to give that play of shadow and line. So we're very excited to see this happen. It'll be really cool to see this when it's all done and really see how the entire facade comes together. So we've been following the progress and kind of the renovation, preservation, restoration, rehabilitation of one of the historic barns here on the property, and it's a very exciting day. The front facade is on. The new doors have been created. Brian is happy. We both share OCD, so the vertical slots in the wood all line up so it looks correct. So Brian, why don't you give us a show of what happened here? Tell us about the doors, and then what's the plan for this barn?
Well, the plan at this point is they completed the doors this week. Tom Cavalier designed these doors based off on a photo we had given him of some doors we really liked, although they were overhead doors. We said this was the type of carriage design we were looking for with the arch. Since we didn't have any old photos to go with on the barn, all we knew is that there were markings that indicated hinges were here at one time. So they basically designed the doors to be 9 foot wide to accommodate the sleigh, carriage, and trailer that will be housed here, and came up with this really nice looking design. They purchased the hinges right over here at the Habitat Restore, so we'd like to support our local friends over there. Been a great partner. And they designed the doors. They had to build the wall out a little bit because the header beam needed replacing with an engineered lumber.
Sure.
So you can't see it, but it's behind this, and that's given the barn all of its horizontal strength in carrying the load. So the doors are very interesting. They're 9 feet wide, swing outs. He has a very interesting lock mechanism that can't be tampered with. Okay. So that's really a nice vandal-proof design.
Yeah.
And you'll see the doors are very, very solid.
Good and solid.
And they're so well balanced you can move them with your pinky. So that's a really nice quality design.
It's going to be fantastic.
And the last step is to put a little rubber gasket on the bottom just to keep out any other rodents that might be able to slip under the doors. Although we created a lip with the concrete to help block that as well. So eventually, oh, these are all pinned shut. The doors will swing well out of the way, so the carriage and sleigh can either be displayed in the barns or be coming and going out very easily. And now the work begins on the inside. First is to clean up all the beadboard that's in the ceiling and walls. It's actually kind of a cool design that we kept.
Yeah.
And we'll stain the insides of the doors to match. And then we'll get focused on the outside, which will take an oil-based primer and paint it the same color scheme as the house. So it'll be the brilliant red and greens here. And I think it's going to be a very good looking barn. They've also gone around the whole perimeter, touched up any battens that needed replacing.
Okay.
They put a base plate on just to prevent any further erosion of the wood siding and prevent any other rodents or varmints getting in. So they really, this barn will pay for itself in a few years based on what it costs us for storage for the carriage and sleigh right now. So it's just a fantastic preservation of one of the original pieces on the property.
Nicely done. So here on the second floor of the house are mostly bedrooms and some chambers, maybe some sitting rooms, but it's a lot more subtle and less fancy than you would find downstairs in the public spaces. Volunteers have been working multiple hours here in the room, repainting, taking down wallpaper, kind of making it a little more subtle. But one of the cool details that really is popping now are these amazing leaded glass windows on the front of the house. So when we're standing on the front, on the right side, there's a big bow window that you see, and that's what we're looking at here. So recently a volunteer has painstakingly painted the woodwork that very, very dark black to really make it stand out and bring out the detail of the glass.
Another challenge in this room was the plaster ceiling. Before we could even get an estimate, we had to remove several layers of wallpaper plus numerous layers of paint over the years that made scraping down to the original plaster a bit of a challenge. But we worked for about 3 days to get this removed.
Yeah.
And now we can see the extent of what needs to be repaired. And we can see some prior plaster repairs over on this side of the room. So we hope that the plasterers, which is really a very interesting art form anymore, can come in and either button it up and secure it and recoat it, or they may have to remove part of it to the lath board and replaster the ceiling. But upstairs, this is the last room that really requires significant plaster work.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, so we're doing better in that front.
It's going to look good.
It's going to look very nice. All these ceilings have curvature, different dimensions based on what room you're standing in, which is kind of cool. So each room definitely had its own characteristics. The middle parlor, the middle bedroom, actually has a much nicer inlay floor.
Right.
And,
and I think that room has been repainted as well, right?
Yes, it just got a new paint job this week.
Why don't we go check that out and see how that one's coming along?
Okay.
So here we are in another one of the chambers on the second floor, which has been recently repainted and refreshed. And this one's quite an anomaly for the house. As we just said earlier, the rooms upstairs are a little more simple and basic, but then we have this room. We're not really sure what it was originally, but it has this beautiful plaster detailing around the ceiling and the inlaid floor. Brian, kind of what are the thoughts for these rooms upstairs? What's the vision of the Historical Society of how these will be used?
Well, this is one room that has probably the maximum wall space. So we're thinking a lot of the business collection that we have at the John Smart House, which includes many items we've never been able to display, will come to this room.
Okay.
This large bookcase was left from the family, and it actually serves a very nice display, as will this knick-knack rail all around the perimeter, which will really serve nice for some of the many small items we have from the county businesses. I did locate the door up in the attic that originally separated the closet when it was apartments in the 50s.
Oh, okay.
They cut that doorway through as an apartment went from the rear of the house to the front. Fortunately, the door was right up in the attic, easy to find.
As are 100 million other
there's
things.
many other doors up there too, but this one works. It's the right size. It's just missing the hinges, of course, so we'll have to find the correct size hinge to put on the door, but it's going to be nice. That way we can secure this room from the office area, which is the third bedroom on this floor on the north wing. So that's going to be a nice purpose.
That'll be fantastic, yeah.
And it gets one less door in the attic. So.
All right. So we're back down in the basement, kind of checking out some of the finished work, and Burke Electric out of Seville, Ohio has done just an amazing job. If you remember at one of our first visits, there were electric panels all over the place, and fuses and breakers and wires and lions and tigers and bears. But now everything is over here. So Brian, what service do we have in the house? Tell me a little bit about what the final product here.
Well, what Randy did is actually what you said. He rewired the spaghetti diagrams here of numerous types of wiring used over the years to a new 200 amp circuit box, and he also put in provisions for eventual air conditioning and outdoor lighting needs. So we have plenty of electric coming into the house that will support any future events. Plus, it makes it much safer having things on breakers rather than fuses. And actually, the electric service in the house has been quite good. He's going to update some of the outlets, put GFIs in where they should be, and some switches. And we have a couple exit emergency lights we want to install at some areas where it won't be, where they're needed, on the stairwells primarily. So Randy's done an excellent job. He's really had to think this one through a lot, because trying to track every circuit with 6 different fuse boxes and different, when it was apartments, some things went this way, some went that way. And then he also installed a lot of basement lighting, so the actual basement rooms are very well lit now.
Yeah, well, good job. Again, things are coming along. It looks great.